Last time we saw that for a marriage to be successful, there are some preparations that need to be done. But before ever we become aware of the person we are going to marry, and for a girl it will be who will ask you, really, because it's not right that a girl start asking a man. There is God that is making the preparations. And in the case of what we are discussing today, it was how God prepared my husband to become my husband. He had a pretty hard life. Yes, my life started before the marriage of my parents. I had my own difficulties, but his own was really bad. His mother died in childbirth, and at that time he was barely 3. She was expecting another child, and eventually it didn't go well, and she died and the child died. And he said he remembers that his mother was buried and the child was buried separately, as the tradition was. Shortly after, his dad died, and thankfully he was living in a community that was supportive. And also he had sisters that were far older than him. His mother had many children, according to him some 20, but most of them died. But his first sister that was alive was already married. So when the mother died, he was first living with his brother that was older than him by 3 years, and then shortly after he was taken to his sister's place, and he lived with them quite a while, until someone that was related to the family, that was having a new teacher's job in the north, came to take him, so that it will release the burden of the family. And so he went to the north, and then from there he went to primary school. And after primary school, he couldn't continue because there was absolutely no money to take care of him, to pay for his fees. And so he started teacher training, and then having times of teaching in primary school as a pupil teacher, they called it at that time, where there was lack of teachers, so they used to take people that were trainees. And at that time he was just a teenager, and he started teaching in different places. So by the time he was teaching, then he continued studies, but by correspondence. He wrote and applied for a studentship with the University of London, correspondence course. And he studied and got the equivalent of A-levels as end of high school in English, and 2 or 3 subjects. So all that time he was studying, he had no one to ask for support or advice. All around him, people were illiterate, because that family had no previous occasions to study. He was the first one. So he said that sometimes when he needs help with any assignment, then he would have to trek some 3 kilometers to meet someone that has gone to school and knows. And at night there was no light, so he was studying with these oil lamps, the traditional oil lamps that were smoky and didn't bring much light. But he was very determined, so he passed. And then when he finished that, by that time he had written just a little pamphlet in English, and it was published in a newspaper. And someone in the Netherlands read that and loved it, and managed to find his address and wrote him and said she really loved that pamphlet. Could she publish it in the Netherlands? And then she also asked him about his plans for studies. And he explained that he wanted to go to the university, but that there was no way he could make it because there was no money for school fees, and that he was an orphan. And she arranged for him to get a scholarship from the government of Netherlands. So this catered for his studies. But in the middle of his studies, war started, what is called the Biafran War, or Nigerian Civil War. And he had to run away from the university back to his cultural land in the southeast of Nigeria. And for 3 years he was without contact with the university. He was just surviving. He nearly died during the war, but thankfully he survived. And it's only at the end of the war he was able to trek many kilometers to go back to a place from where he could go back to the university in southwest Nigeria and continue his studies and finish. So by the time he came to France for his year abroad, because he was studying French, he was supposed to have gone the year before, but his name was forgotten. So this was again a delay. And eventually, instead of going south to Nice, then he went to Grenoble, that was my university. And we met in the Christian Union. Now, if you summarize this, you can see that, first of all, he was an orphan. Secondly, he had nobody to help him. He studied without really much support. He couldn't go to the secondary school. He had to study on his own. And then when he finished, there was no money, and God started intervening directly into his life. Because between the Netherlands and Nigeria, there is no possibility, even remote, that someone would have helped him. But God did it. But yet, the devil was against him. So when he went to uni, then he got stopped by the war. During the war, he nearly died. Thousands died that day during a particular battle, but he escaped safe. He was reciting Psalm 91, as he said. And then when he went back to the uni to finish his studies, his lecturer forgot to put his name for year abroad on the right year. And so he had to wait another year. And this looked like an error, a human error, but actually it turned into God's plan. So we see that what God had put in his heart by that time was education is key. Education is might. Education is power. Like he said, a pen is mightier than the sword. But then he wanted to pass it on so that others would not suffer what he suffered. So his plan, his desire, deep desire, was to educate others. And when we met, he told me, I'm not going to stay in France. I'm not going to embark on PhD or whatever studies. I came here just to learn French for a year. I'm going back because I want to start teaching and have a passion for children. And he outlined his life plan to me and said, it's either you agree or we separate. And it struck me because it was most unusual. But you see that God gave me a desire to have children. I loved children and I loved teaching, education. And for him, it was exactly the same. So we came from unlikely neighborhood. I mean, we were so far away. And yet, we just locked in together. Same idea, same passion. And it's how God does. And when we married, we started putting into practice this thing that God had put in our hearts, that became our life mission. And so it's very important. Then you ask yourself, how am I starting on that path? What is marriage for me? bless you.